Welcome back to the Mental Health Takeaways podcast. We have got not one, but two great guests for you to listen to in this episode. Two fantastic guests. Yes, they are also PE teachers, but they don't have beards. So there's 4 PE teachers, but only 2 with beards and 2 without beards. And so because we've got a takeaway show full of PE teachers, we've got some monster takeaway orders, but we are also going to talk about masculinity and some of the challenges of masculinity and growing up in that world, and what actually does it mean to be masculine? Who are the role models? Well, we've got a couple on the show for you. We're going to be talking man points and the impact that might have, and ultimately seeking out how young people grow up to be happy individuals.
Yeah, Brad, this is a banging episode. When we recorded it, I thought that was not just fun, but really informative as well, and really useful kind of stuff for young men to listen to. And I've been informed recently that there are several young men that tune into the podcast, but also I think really relevant if you are a teacher or a parent of a young man. Really important for you to tune in, or if you know someone who's a parent or a teacher, send this show to them, because this is relevant to the developing mental health of those young people. So yeah, share this show around, because it's the information that people really need to be aware of. Stay tuned. Here's the show. Sam and Elliot, welcome to Mental Health Takeaways podcast. Just to explain the format that we'll go through for today's podcast, because we're hoping you're obviously going to bring thousands of new listeners with you to the show, and we kind of operate in quite a different format to lots of other podcasts. What we're going to do is we're going to ask you about your takeaway food choices, if you were to have, so you can start thinking about those now. We're going to ask you about those because loads of the factors that affect mental health can get drawn into conversations around takeaway food choices. Things like, who do you live with, which is a massive factor for people's mental health. Are you on a budget? Because finances are a huge thing to do with mental health. And then we kind of, people often don't realize that they give away lots more personal information in those conversations just around what you'd have for a takeaway. So we'll start with that. And then, because we're silly and stupid, we will get into some would you rather questions. It started off with, I might as well name check him. There was a comedian called Simon Brodkin who was doing a sketch about doing a eulogy, and he realised that all he knew about his best mate was his answers to his would you rather questions. So that all he could tell you was he'd rather have Pringles for fingers than What's-Its for toes, and other similar kind of light-hearted, silly questions. But what we tend to do is wrap in like other mental health scenarios and go, would you rather this or would you rather that? But we're going to do those with the idea of toxic masculinity or masculinity. So we'll have our would you rather questions.
I really want to zone in just in response to Elliot's face when he mentioned Pringles for fingers or What's-Its for toes, because it looked like he was just like, oh, what would I have?
I just didn't see any benefit to any of them. And the only problem is that what's it?
Yeah, neither's supposed to be a plus.
No,
that's the idea, mate.
The what's it? Like your shoes would be horrendous, all that dust everywhere. But at least the fingers.
I think we've spoken in the past about there being potential advantages to Pringles for fingers when it comes to swimming and paddling out as a surfer. That isn't your would you rather, Elliot. You don't get that question tonight.
No,
come back another time. We can do that one. Then we think a really powerful tool is the whole idea of talking to a younger and older version of yourself. But you guys are going to get that with a twist tonight. And then, as you guys will know, whenever you go on any sort of teacher training, I don't think you want a great big philosophical concept to go away and think about. What Brad and I decided we wanted from education and training is a takeaway, like a solid, this thing, do this thing. Like the best teacher training I've ever been on was with an interactive whiteboard. And they said, press this, press that, and you'll get this. And I was like, brilliant. That's all I need from this training today. So what we hope to generate from the conversation are takeaways that actually summarize the conversation and are just a short, snappy little piece of wisdom that you can take away from this conversation and say, that's what I learned from that conversation with Matt, Brad, Sam, and Elliot. So that's kind of the final objective that we're working to. Do you want to jump into the takeaways and see what these guys want to eat?
So before we find out a bit more about why you're here and the sorts of things you've been up to, we're going to go straight into that. So on a takeaway night, any given night you choose, what would be your takeaway of choice?
Mine's easy. I think it's just that. Well, I love a curry. It's going to be a curry. Probably, I always go lamb as well. I'd probably have a lamb tikka masala. It's kind of safe, but just solid. I just can't. There's nothing. I was watching one of your previous episodes, and I can't remember his name, but he said he's all about the sides, and I think that is the main part of a curry. This
is what I'm waiting to hear from you, Elliot. Yeah, that's what excites me.
And you pay for a meal, but you'll also get a meal the next day if you order enough. You take it home. So I would have a lamb tikka masala with probably sag paneer on the side and some samosas in there with naan as well. Obviously,
that is a solid order.
That is a solid order. What naan are you going for?
Peshwari. It's my favourite.
Is that the coconut one?
Yeah,
coconut. Yeah, it's got to be that one. Yeah, great choice. And who would you likely have that with, Elliot?
Well, we actually some of the guys at work, we started a curry club like a month ago. 2 months ago. So it's not set dates, but we do it. We're trying to do it like once every 2 months. So at the moment, that's who it is.
Yeah, cool.
So friends from work, just some mates.
You got any vacancies at your work? I'm here for the curry club.
No.
Oh, damn shame.
And what about you, Sam? What would you be going for?
I'm actually going to go for. I'm torn between Domino's or Chinese. I'm going to sit on to Chinese. Sunday night Chinese. Always pick the same thing. I noticed in a previous episode, actually, you said that Usain Bolt always picks the same thing.
Yes.
Takeaway. So in that way only, I am quite similar to Usain Bolt. Maybe duck pancakes, beef and black bean sauce, chicken chow mein. Yeah.
This is more than I can write down. I could never be a waiter, you know. Duck pancakes, black bean sauce.
I think even without saying anything, just sort of people listening, when they find out that Elliot and Sam are based in schools for their work, I think they're going to know what department they come from based on the volume of food ordered in that takeaway.
Yeah. Heavily related to our step plan. So that's how we can do it.
That's prejudicial, Bradley.
That's great, and like absolute solid choices. And Sam, you said sort of Sunday night would be your takeaway night.
I quite like a Sunday night takeaway because it cheers you up a bit on a Sunday, actually. And in terms of the sort of who with, so the duck pancakes always kind of, we had them a lot when I was a kid, so it's sort of a bit of a family thing. Kind of brings me back to what we did as a kid.
Yeah, cool. Do you know, it's funny you say that because this, when was it? Saturday night, I had my little boy this weekend, and he loves duck pancakes. And so we got those on Saturday night, and we watched because the new series of Gladiators started. And
brilliant.
And I literally said to him, I was like, mate, this is like bizarre because I used to be like a young boy watching, Gladiators, Saturday night TV, when Saturday night TV was class, and one of my favourite things was having like duck pancakes, and so it was like so cool that we were literally doing that and living our best life watching the Gladiators whilst eating it.
Who's your favourite Gladiator?
Oh wow, put me on the spot.
You've got to go with legend. He's another PE teacher.
Yeah. He might be Elliot.
Does he? I've never seen it. Oh, well, I have seen it, obviously. I watched the classic one. I haven't really watched the recent one.
I feel like the classic one, like old-fashioned Ribena, it was just better than new Ribena.
Yeah.
Like it had all the bad stuff still in it.
Yeah.
The sprinter's on it, isn't it? Is that Harry Aitken-Zariti?
Yeah, he's on it, yeah.
I wouldn't want to go against him.
No, well, I don't think I'd.
It's a totally different ball game, and actually makes me think about some of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later on. Because I think if you're a guy going on gladiators now, I think it is true for women as well. Because actually, some of the female gladiators are massive as well, and they're tall and they're absolutely built. But the blokes are just ginormous. I'm like, and I still kind of think, yeah, I could fancy myself at gladiators, but I think I'd get there and I'd be like, oh my God. Do you know what? Yeah. They're just huge, aren't they, in every sense of the word? And I just think, wow, God, the blokes have got a real disadvantage. They're about a foot shorter and like so much lighter. It's unbelievable.
Any physical battle you're going to lose. So you've got to rely on running away from them. But
that's it. I'm great at running away. Yeah, I could do that. They'd never. I'd get up that wall quicker than them. Everything else, no good.
Brad, I worried then that you're going to try to frame a male mental health conversation around gladiators and just use that as the vehicle for which we explore male mental health and masculinity.
Yeah, no, that would have been clever of me to do, wouldn't it? But no,
we're not that clever. Not bright enough for that. Right, should we lock in those takeaway orders, Brad, and then get into the would you rathers?
Let's do it.
Brad, where's the show gone?
We've just taken a brief pause so that I can tell you that Brad Smith Hypnotherapy is currently taking on new clients. If you'd like more information about that, you can find all the services available on my website, www.bradsmithhypnotherapy.co.uk, and you can find my contact details to get in touch to book your free initial consultation now.
So recently, we produced a video regarding toxic masculinity, and the idea behind it was not to say that men are toxic. And in fact, we've had some. We had it on our school Twitter, and there were some people commenting, as they do, like internet warriors, about this is not what we should be teaching kids in school. But it kind of really justified the point, is that that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it to show the toxic traits that can be seen in men, and the reasons also why you want to not have those traits, but also that some of the things that we don't appreciate as men are what make us the best thing that we can be, and what is so special about us. So we made a video, and we got really fortunate. It was picked up by BBC South, like Points West, and we've had a really, really positive, some really positive feedback. I've been like super blown away. I've had people message me that I haven't spoke to in 10 years. They're like, oh, they played that at my school, or it's been at my work and stuff. So it's been amazing. And we're just really glad that people have taken the time to watch it, but also to appreciate it and say, yeah, and hopefully someone got something from it. But so I kind of was the face of the whole thing, because it was it was an assembly that we did at school. But Sam was like a huge sounding board, and the previous years, Sam has done a lot of work on men's mental health. I don't know why, but this year the video has got lots of traction. But there's been some fantastic videos, and maybe we send you them after what we've done previously.
We'd love to. With your permission and permission of the school, and if it's not there, then it's not there. But with those permissions, we'd love to share that stuff and make that accessible to our listeners. That'd be great.
But yeah, Sam, he's been fantastic, which is why I asked him to come on with me, because he's been my sounding board. And also, likewise, like you do as men, we talk about men's mental health, you bounce ideas off each other and you seek each other out, and that's what we did, and we produced something really, really good. And we can't take credit for the editing. We've got one of our colleagues that works at is unreal. However, the sentiment is exactly how we're just really proud of how it came across, and it's been really good.
What was the Twitter reaction that you were talking about? People were saying that you shouldn't be.
No, I've probably said to Sam before, let's not get into this, but it wasn't. It's exactly what Twitter is. People hide behind the keyboard and they can say whatever they want. It was more that the main thing was people saying you can't tell men to not be men, which is exactly not what we're trying to do. So it was all keyboard warriors that, like, some of the usernames you'd seen, you'd be like, I cannot take you seriously. So it hasn't really, it's really not been an issue. In fact, it's like I said, it's reaffirmed our point that some of these comments are the reason that we did this whole thing in the first place, because not everyone quite gets it.
Sam, you rolled your eyes at that. I'm curious to know why. What your thoughts are?
I mean, it doesn't reflect the response that it's had.
Oh yeah.
Locally, sort of within the school and within the wider area, etc., etc. I think it's just poisonous Twitter, unfortunately, which is a real shame, because it was like they hadn't really watched the video. The video isn't really about a divisive sort of toxic masculinity as a divisive thing, like all boys are toxic. It's more about, in fact, it's much more about how we can help to educate boys to become sort of more positive, kind humans and good people, and look after each other and their communities. It was much more focused on the positive side of it.
There was something that I've watched the video numerous times, and there was a bit that I've written down in large letters. I'm sorry, I don't know which of your colleagues it was that said this part, but I thought it was brilliantly summarised towards the end of the video, because it's talking about what men and boys should be or should seek to be. And it's difficult, isn't it? You're going to need to be brave and strong in order to be vulnerable and open yourself up to criticism. And all of that stuff's difficult. But this one guy said it is about he said to be unapologetically, I think it was authentic. And that whole idea of being unapologetic, of not making excuses and not having to follow the crowd and not having to do what other people are saying, do this, do that. And that if you like a particular thing, I can remember as a boy and as a young man denying that I liked certain things. Why not? Let's just open up to it now. Denying that I liked Counting Crows and The Lighthouse Family and stuff like that. Like,
one of my favourite movies.
But like, just feeling as if I have to deny that, because that's not what my crowd are into. So I have to say I like hip hop. But actually, real strength and real bravery comes from being unapologetically authentic and saying, actually, like, this is what I like. And when my mum puts, you guys would be too young to remember Eddie Reader and stuff like that. God, I'm embarrassed. Well, maybe I shouldn't be embarrassed. But yeah,
no idea who he's on about, lads. Sorry.
Well, we'll post them on our stories.
I should add to what Elliot said there, because he's done himself a little bit of a disservice there in terms of the context. So obviously we did make the video, but Elliot led the assemblies this week, kind of under the Movember umbrella, although we didn't want it to be about Movember at all. We just wanted it to be about masculinity on some level. So we did do the video, but the assembly was focused on kind of the messages from the All Blacks, like the no idiots mantra, and how we want school, like, sweep your sheds, etc. And as part of the assembly series, and indeed the BBC interview, Elliot had students with him too that were, Elliot's a ridiculously good role model, but the students also were presenting around the same sort of, that kind of no idiots mentality was right at the heart of the message. And it was lovely to hear in the subsequent weeks, like some of our rugby teams sort of say, "No idiots, boys," when they were playing. And we there was a sixth form group that went out, and they were overheard by someone saying, "We sweep our own sheds," when they wouldn't let a cleaner clean up after the table. And that was as a direct impact of the assemblies that Elliot fronted up. So there was kind of that was the other inner school thing that happened, and it was really powerful. So that was 1,200 people that got that message, and it was absolutely brilliant.
That leads me perfect. Oh, sorry, go on, Elliot.
No, I was just going to say that like the whole thing is like the toxic masculinity is about being a good person, but there's two sides to it, isn't there? There's the you want to look after yourself because these toxic traits affect you, but also what we talked about is how it affects society, and that's where the All Blacks came into it. We had to say no idiots, but of course the real thing is no dickheads, and it came about that because we certainly don't have a problem in our school, but it only takes like a couple of things or some people to go off track, and they affect everyone, and they can affect the environment for their peers, the girls, the boys, the adults, the teachers. And we're just talking about, right, if everyone I guess it's like we're PE teachers, everyone pulls in the same direction, we're all going to be doing the same thing. And that is, for me, translates perfectly into men's mental health. Is
so perfectly, and it translates into a question that I'd love to ask you both. Brad and I learned only really recently this concept of man points, and that actually, have you heard of it? It was Chris Williamson that brought it to my attention that that the more man points you accumulate, the more license you have to talk about your feelings and your emotions and your negative experiences, and mental ill health would be included in that, but that also skews the conversation, because then you only really hear from those men who have typically or that have excelled in typically masculine roles. And so that video with the All Blacks, it's as if those All Blacks have accumulated enough man points to be able to put their hand up and say, I struggle, or I've had this difficulty. And the example that immediately jumped into my mind is I quite recently listened to the Joe Marler podcast, and he had the Stoltman brothers on. Now, you're not going to find like a more masculine looking being on the planet than those two things. And one of them, I can't remember, it was the older one. Is it Tom that's the older one? No, but one of them was talking about that he'd had some, whatever he described it as, I think he used the word struggles. He'd had some struggles with his mental health. And it was like, he's got license to talk about that. And I wondered if you two feel like, do you have more license to talk about mental health in your school because you're PE teachers? Because I think, like, if I weren't to know you both and just see a staff list of teachers in a school, I would presume the most man points have been accumulated by the PE department, or that was other people's perception of the PE department.
I tell you what, it's a really interesting concept, and it's quite flawed, isn't it? What does that say? We can only listen to people who do masculine things.
Absolutely.
That being said, I actually think a lot of in school we're trying to create role models. I said about Elliot being a role model, and there is something really powerful, and I'm sort of contradicting what you just said, I suppose, about seeing someone who is so strong and, confident, as Elliot is, showing empathy and sort of kindness, and it certainly made it really powerful. That being said, I'm sure lots of people would be able to deliver the same message, but that's a super interesting concept. Like Vinnie Jones, like you said, it's like if you've accumulated it on the scale, you can get it back. That's not right, is it?
Yeah, well, no, it's not right. And I don't know if either of you have read. There's an amazing book called The Descent of Man by Grayson Perry, who is an artist. He had a Channel 4 show during the lockdowns that kind of kept people's spirits up. But he will do things like he'll dress up as a 6-year-old girl, like he's got an alter ego, and he maintains there's nothing sexual about it. But he's excelled in a field that is not a typically masculine field. And he plays with gender identity. He identifies as a man, absolutely, but he will wear women's clothes, and he'll kind of explore that a little bit. And he's been talking about male mental health for decades. But because he hasn't excelled in a male-dominated field, it feels as if his voice isn't being heard as being as relevant. But his book, The Descent of Man, I've referenced it on the podcast before. It finishes with a men's Bill of Rights, because there's that debate about if there's a minister for women, should there be a minister for men? And the Bill of Rights that he proposes for men is like the right to be silly, the right to be weak, the right to cry, the right to be wrong, the right to be intuitive. And it feels like those are the rights that men actually have fewer of. I think people presume men have way more rights, and we do, and we need to own up to that and own that. But likewise, realise the things that we're lacking as well.
It is an interesting concept. I don't want to sway either way. I guess like people that are seen as more masculine are probably going to pull a larger audience generally because they're seen to be more popular and whatnot. But I don't think it's necessarily because of that. There's, for example, I can't think of anyone off the head. I imagine there's someone who's probably like, I don't know Ben Stokes. This is just him as an example. He's done some heroic things and he's come out and talked about that. However, if he'd done the same things and come out and talked about it, and he was really boring, he's very charismatic, it still wouldn't have the same effect. I mean, it is interesting, and I'd like to believe that isn't the case, the whole masculinity thing. But I think sadly, there is something you're onto.
I mean, if anybody wants to explore that a little bit more, there's two men that are not the archetypal masculine portrait. So Ryland Clark has a BBC podcast. I can't remember the name of it now, but it's about how masculine people are feeling. And I've always disliked, not as from a masculine point of view, but I've always disliked Lawrence Llewellyn-Bowen. Like, he just gets on my tits. But he was on that podcast, and I came away from it thinking, my God, that man's got his head screwed on. Like, he is another man who has excelled in a field that is not typically a masculine or male-dominated field. But that podcast, I came away from it thinking, he's really done some thinking about what masculinity is. Anyway, I still haven't actually asked you the question.
What was the question?
I'll tell you now. Would you personally rather have more man points, and I think man points are about how you're perceived than anything you've actually done?
When I was younger, I haven't heard that phrase in years, but like, that's man points, just like for doing something masculine. I haven't heard that in years. I didn't know it was still a thing.
I hadn't heard it at all until this week.
It was just like when we were in college and school, they'd be like, "Oh, you get man points for that because it's like seen to be heroic or brave."
Yeah,
I mean, I've not,
which is kind of bullshit, really. But
yeah.
So, would you rather have more man points, but more mental health issues that you needed to talk about and needed to share and needed to offload, or fewer man points and fewer mental health issues to share and offload?
Second one,
yeah.
Brad, I'm going to see if you're going to offer any difference on this, because you know my answer to it.
Yeah, I'm with these guys in terms of that second one. Just to be happier, like the idea of lots of man points. And again, I think this is why it's so important in terms of what you guys have done, because I think it's different for me and Nibbo particularly. Let's be honest, we're a generation above you guys. Even though we look incredibly young and handsome still, but I think it's easier for us to kind of recognize actually life is about being happy, whereas I think to certainly the young men that you have been speaking to in the work that you've been doing, I don't know if that's as high up on their radar as it is to be seen to be that guy with the man points, and the one who can go and smash it on the rugby field, and then all of that typically masculine stuff. And I think there's a real interesting narrative around it, and when you guys were talking about the reaction you'd had, overwhelmingly positive, which is absolutely right. But those little nuggets of negativity. And I know the way that kind of social media and stuff is wired up for, it sends us so much more negative stuff than it does the positive stuff. So I think if you're a young person in a school growing up, particularly if you're a male and, you might not have that role model, and it's great that you guys are so clearly going to be those role models to certain boys growing up. If you haven't got that, I think it's so easy to be swayed down the negative side of social media that they see, and that, this is a man's role and a man's got to do this, and you've got to earn this amount and you've got to look this way. And if you don't, then you're not really a man. Like that is the toxic stuff. And I imagine some of those trolls that chimed in, having not even seen the work that you've done, are probably bearing some sort of issues that they need to deal with, but haven't been that kind of brave and strong enough to be vulnerable with it. And so they're just dragging that big bag of shit around with them. And actually, it's easier to point the finger at you and criticize the stuff that you've done to mask their own insecurities. So yeah, for me, it's an easy one. It's about being happy, about not having issues.
Why did you guys go for the answers you went for?
I would
Man points are about how people perceive you, aren't they?
Yeah.
So if you're just after that, which is hard to not be sometimes, that's not real happiness, is it? So that's like sort of extrinsic, I suppose.
Yeah, very true.
I think,
Elliot.
I was just like what you say about school is a really true point, and I think I was really fortunate at school. I had a pretty easy ride. I was not the most popular. I wasn't like unpopular, but school was pretty easy. But you do forget, especially nowadays with all the technology, how difficult it can be, and how difficult it is to just find your place and know who you are. Like it took me. I still don't know, and there's still kids every day that you'll see going from one friendship group to another, and you can see them following groups of people around that you're like, you just don't fit in with them. Everyone can see that. And they would be the people that would choose the other option because what they care about is they want to be liked. Okay, everyone wants to be liked. Everyone wants to have their purpose. And I don't think at that age, until you're sort of like 30, 35, 40, I don't know, you don't know your purpose. Maybe you never do. But I think that's the hardest part and I think it took me to have a little bit of a lapse with my mental health to realise actually all I care about is being happy now. Because when you do have it bad, it really hurts. And there's like no worse feeling. So you might as well be in that. So to answer your question, that's the reason I would pick that. Because it can be seriously, the toll that it can take on you is just so deep, isn't it? That you don't want to go back there again.
And just thinking about age, I wonder if there's like a correlation with the younger men and boys are, the more they would covet the man points over us coveting the lack of mental ill health. Because just to give you my answer, when Brad and I spoke about these questions before coming on air, I said, yeah, I want the second one. I want fewer issues and less man points because who gives a damn what other people are saying about me? And if I can just be internally happy, that's the win.
I think that's a really important point. And when you mentioned, Sam, about almost that internal versus external, I think that's such a crucial thing these days, especially for young people, where we know they're kind of diverting to online. We know that, people are less kind of interactive face to face. And so again, it comes back to that kind of what we're seeing and that want for likes. And that, in terms of the content people are posting, like someone's posting some pictures of them flexing at the gym or something to score those man points and to get those likes. No one's posting do you know what? I felt crap today, and kind of sharing some of that journey. And that's kind of why we're here on the pod, because it's really important to recognize that before some people are going to go and talk to other men, whether that be mates, family, or a therapist, before they're going to do that, I think they need to see it. And that's why it's so valuable when people come on the show and share their kind of journey and their story. And I think that is that kind of being brave and strong to be vulnerable that we were talking about a little while ago. So I think, it's different now. We need to acknowledge that, like, it's different for kids growing up, and what is important to them is about having some sort of social media presence, and probably is around that man points, which makes the work that you guys have done even more important, to let those young people know that actually it's okay. It's okay if you're having a bit of a wobble, that's all right. And everyone goes through that at some point in their life, and you don't have to stay stuck there, but it can be tough and you'll come out the other side. And I just think it's mega what you guys have achieved, really.
I think you've made a really interesting point, and I think compared to when we were at school, just through social media, young people are exposed to so much more kind of appearance-based, like hyper norms, and it's much more frequent. For us, it might be sort of men's health at the newsagents as you walk past to get your Mars bar, whereas for them it's every day and it's every scroll, if you like, and that's how you get the likes. And that's kind of how you get the extrinsic wins, which ties to the man points. By the way, that's completely true for girls as well. That isn't just a boy thing.
Yeah.
The other difference, and that's really difficult. I think I would have found that difficult as a teenage boy, sort of facing that. Like, what do you do with that when you're trying to grow up yourself? And as you just said, sort of find yourself. I think there is much more, though, than we had around mental health for boys.
Yeah.
They are more in touch with it.
Yeah.
And when you work with sports teams, and actually sports teams that I'd play in and Elliot would play in, it is more of a conversation. It wasn't really, was it?
Yeah. No, not at all.
So those two things have changed, but it's interesting you said about sort of finding your place. On a previous episode, you said about reframing the alpha male, which I thought was a super interesting concept. And I was, because obviously we're trying to educate these young sort of boys we're talking about now, by reframing that alpha male, aren't we? Like confident, strong, yes, but also sort of kind and humble, yes. And we do it through role modeling. It's not just Elliot. There's so many strong role models in our school as staff, male and female, that are just, carrying that. And I think that environment's huge, isn't it? Sorry, it's talking about the social media environment being a negative one. I think where you have a positive environment with lots of really positive role models, you can help to kind of reframe what an alpha male is, and hopefully it's a slightly different thing to what maybe it was for us.
And it just takes a little bit of perspective and a little bit of education around male mental health, but male mental health in this case, to reframe that alpha male. Because if we say alpha males do things that are hard and scary, talking about your mental health has previously been, and because there's more open doors now, that picture's changing. But talking about your mental health has previously been hard and scary, to the point where it scared people away from having those conversations. So if you want to show that you're not afraid of stuff, do something like that. If you want to show you're not afraid, be vulnerable, because that will really scare you.
And I think for young kids as well, though, a lot of it is they don't actually understand what the feeling they're feeling is.
Yes.
And that comes from a lot of education as well, isn't it? Is that why am I agitated all the time? Like, why does that get on my nerves? Was I always like that? Because I've been through that as well. I'm like, have I always been agitated at this thing? Does this annoy me more than it usually does? And I think that comes with like we said, like in our school, we're excellent. We do lots and lots of education on it. But students that don't attend there, if their attendance is poor, they're going to miss all of these really crucial life lessons, which is then, unfortunately, when things can start to turn a little bit toxic, can't they? Because when you don't understand how you're feeling and how to manage them. And I think that would be the biggest thing that we try and focus on, is just making sure, like we said, with the positive role models, but just ensuring that all people are given an opportunity to speak their mind, because it doesn't.
Can I ask you both a question that's totally off script that I haven't run by Brad yet, so he might say I can't ask you this. But I just wonder, in your school years, what role you feel like sport, because obviously you're both PE teachers, what role you feel like sport played in your either mental health or regulating your mood? Because I know, speaking personally, if I was angry about something in the week, my school rugby games used to be on a Saturday. If I was angry about something in the week, that was getting taken out on a Saturday. And then Saturday afternoon, I felt great. I felt better. And I'd feel good until like Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning. And then if sort of just life's frustrations had built up, I was kind of putting it in the locker and I was taking it out again on Saturday. And that was what I loved about rugby, that you could do that within the law and, not with any malicious intent, but you could really work out any frustrations legally and socially acceptably on the pitch. Well, yeah, you can't just go and deck someone in the street, but if you want to put your shoulder into their ribs on a rugby field, then you're a hero. Did it have a similar role for you guys in your journeys with sport?
Are you going to go, Sam? That's fine.
No, you go.
Yeah. I think I played everything at school, like in school, out of school, and I think probably the thing for me, and maybe this is just a good thing for life, and I'm now exercising a lot and I feel great, is I did so much that I was just constantly quite tired.
Yes.
And when you're in that, like, that euphoric haze of being tired, things don't bother you so much. I think that you feel some success, you've achieved something, and I think that really mellows me out. Like after you go to the gym, I say it to the students, sometimes I come in to work after a gym session and I'm like, I feel on top of the moon. I feel epic. Like I feel like this is the best day ever. And that's just from releasing endorphins. And without sport, if I didn't know what that was, I definitely think I'd have struggled. I just think that it's like a drug, isn't it? It's like once you've had it for your life, you just expect it every day.
Well, seeing as you said you've watched a couple of episodes of the podcast already.
Yeah.
See if you can pick out the ones where Brad's been to the gym before and he's sort of like this, versus the ones where he hasn't been to the gym and he's really keyed in and he's really wound into it.
I'm euphoric like that, though.
Yeah.
You're good.
You're happy.
You're confident.
Yeah,
You're happy. You just don't say anything.
It's so true though, you know. And I had this conversation on the way home from the gym, because I spoke to somebody this morning, and actually, like, I was just feeling a bit low this morning, and we just had a conversation, and he messaged me tonight, and he's like, "Oh, mate, just checking in because I'm a bit worried about you, to be honest." And I just, I messaged him straight back, and I was like, "Oh, mate, I'm like, feel so much better. I've been to the gym, I feel good. Been in the spa afterwards, just off home to do the pod." And it changes things, and I think it gives you a perspective. And so, yeah, I think for young people, it's about finding out what that is, because it doesn't have to be the gym. Like I was the same as you, Elliot. I just played every sport. You name it, I was there. I just wanted to play it, and it was great. But if it's not sport, then what is it? What gives them that release? So it's figuring out yourself, I guess, and your tribe, which we referenced.
That's absolutely huge. And certainly you said about sort of when we were youngsters, it was massive for me. I was doing lots of sport, lots of music. I did some drama, and all of those things, they just keep your head on something else, don't they? So you're thinking about something that is just distracting on some level and really positive. So whether it's like tactics or who you're going to play or the league table or learning a part or whatever it is, you've got to kind of focus on it. And the other element to it, which is fab, and that's why we want kids at school to do as much as possible, is the like team or the like non-isolation element of it. You're with people. So because the worst, well, one of the worst places you can be is on your own, like with nothing to think about. So you're in there just like wallowing. And so those things, and then sport, as Elliot said, it's the euphoric bit after the kind of endorphins is a big hit for the mood, isn't it? Which is absolutely amazing.
Huge.
Yeah.
What I love about our job sometimes is you see a student or a child that's not necessarily the cool kid. They're not the sporty one. They'll have a moment in sport and they are the hero for that day. Like they instantly become the coolest kid in the room just for something that they've done. And I love that. And like, that's like a real buzz for me, is when someone that you don't expect to just pluck something out, and that just lifts them. Yeah. You're like, what it can do for them. And then, like, I've had examples of that's happened in a PE lesson. Then I've seen them at rugby club the next day, and then now they're in my team and they play every week. They play on the weekends, and without that little moment, they wouldn't have had that. And like, I'm saying that wouldn't happen in other subjects, but it's certainly definitely more prevalent in PE, that you can find like a family and a place you think that you truly belong.
Yeah, come on, guys! It's the best subject, isn't it? Forget about all those other rubbish ones.
Subject.
I thought you didn't identify as a PE teacher.
Yeah, you're on the outside, Brad. You're not one of us anymore.
Do you know? It's so true though, and I just think. I also think in terms of where you do have the sporty kids who might be perceived as the alpha, actually, in that scenario and in that environment, I think you guys create great opportunities for them to be supportive and encouraging and help others along the way through that leadership. I just think it gives so many opportunities. You will have impacted upon kids in that school, just like all the other teachers will have impacted in positive ways that you might never know anything about, but you're doing it day in, day out, and that's why people do it, isn't it?
And the holidays.
When this goes out, and their head teacher sees this and see how positively they've represented the school, they should get some time off. Probably they've brought a lot of positive attention, so I would put that out there. And they've really behaved. One of the things I loved earlier, because you guys have been so professional, and I don't think we've had guests on the show before that have been like taking notes. Like normally me and Nivo are scribbling bits down, but you guys are there and you've got your pens and taking notes and being very
PE
professional.
teachers, you can't knock PE teachers.
I know, that's it. But it did make me laugh, because I know when you're in that environment, when you work in a school and you do something as public as this, you can be a little bit like, oh God, people are going to watch this and I need to make sure I'm, professional. And what if, people are going to watch this and make certain judgments, and colleagues are going to watch, and all of that sort of stuff. And you've behaved so professionally, but you couldn't help but smile, just like kids in the class, I imagine, when Nibbo swore earlier, and then you said about Lawrence Llewellyn-Bowen getting on your tits.
I didn't start the swearing on this one. You normally give me grief for being the first one to swear, but Elliot said dickhead. He was talking about the All Blacks.
Yeah. It was in context. That's
the floodgates open for me.
But
look, listen, I spared you something because I normally call that interior decorator, designer, whatever he is.
Don't make it worse.
Well, all right. Lawrence Llewellyn-Bellend is what I normally refer to him as, but because I don't like him. But then when he was on that Ryland Clark podcast, he was incredible.
Hey, Nibbo, where's the guest gone?
Brad, I thought I'd take this opportunity to just let our listeners know that my services are available as a mental health first aid instructor to lead mental health first aid courses, the youth courses and the adult courses in their school or organisation or company, and that you can get in touch with me at mattnib@gmail.com. Anyway, back to the show.
You guys have checked out a couple of episodes of the pod, and we normally sort of finish up kind of getting a bit of insight into the guest in terms of advice and conversations that they might have with younger and older selves. The twist for you guys is, because you're both on, is I'd like to know, first of all, Sam, from you, what advice would you give 8-year-old Elliot?
He doesn't need any advice. He's the top guy. He's absolutely smashing life.
I didn't know that then.
Like he couldn't have played it any better. Nothing I could say could help.
No,
just stay on the track you're on, fella. That's what it would be.
I mean, we had that question ruined for us by a previous guest who said, like, why would you tell an 8-year-old to do anything? Why wouldn't you just stand back and let them be what they are? They get it right naturally, and it's adult interference that tends to skew things for them. So why would you tell an 8-year-old? I just thought it was interesting in that obviously he would be someone that presumably you didn't know Elliot when he was 8.
No.
But how do you know he was on the right track? You've picked it up from where he is now, or
look where he is now. He's winning.
I mean, he's on the Mental Health Takeaways podcast. That is the top of the tree.
Yeah.
Elliot, would you agree with that? Were you smashing it at 8?
I think at 8, I didn't know what day it was, and I was loving it. So yeah, I think I would have been. I think that I was thinking about this earlier, and I think my genuinely, before Sam said that, would have just been, just crack on, just keep going on. You're doing fine. And I don't think it's until you're a bit older that you doubt that you're not doing something right. And I think it's hard, isn't it? It's hard, and that's when I guess more responsibility and whatnot. But talking to my 8-year-old self, I would be like, yeah, just if you're enjoying yourself, carry on.
I like that as advice. Go on, Bradders.
So let's flip this around now. You're probably figuring out what's coming here. But Elliot, you're about to eat. To eat? No, you're not. That would be awkward. Elliot, you're about to meet 80-year-old Sam. Is there anything that you would like to ask him, talk to him about? What would you say?
I would ask. What would I? Well, first, this is really tough. I would say
you are the first and only guest to be facing this question.
I don't want to make it a too deep a question to make him have to reflect now, but I would ask. It's a really tough one, but did you enjoy yourself in a weird way? Like I'd like that you did, but it also that would lead on to, well, tell me what you did that was so enjoyable. Why were you successful? Because I have no doubt that you will be, and you will have enjoyed your life. But I'd like to know what the secret nuggets are.
Mate, this is good.
It's a really tough one. I don't want to slag him off. I don't want to ask him a crap question.
That's my face.
And I'll tell you what I find interesting about it. There being 2 guests and you speaking to the younger and older versions of each other, we normally ask, if it's just one guest, what would you say to the younger version of yourself? And you obviously can't. And what would you ask the older version of yourself? But you obviously can't. However, we, in the position of teachers and educators, are in the position where we can talk to younger men and boys. I'm not saying just go up to any random 8-year-old and start dishing out life advice, but like that's an actual possibility. And likewise, we can link in with actual 80-year-old men and ask for their advice and say, look, you've lived a life. Obviously, you grew up in a time that was different to the time that I grew up in, but what advice, what life lessons have you got to pass down to me? So it's the first one we've had where actually there's a viable option that people could actually pursue that wisdom from someone else.
At our school for our year 11 leavers, do you know the Baz Luhrmann song?
Sunscreen.
Yeah.
The quote in it, be careful with, advice is a form of, I can't remember exactly.
Nostalgia,
regurgitating it and giving it out to whatever it is. But I certainly think that's true. I think that, and you have to be careful with that sometimes when you're giving people advice, don't you? Because it is just a recollection of what you did previously and see if you get it right and give them better advice. But I definitely think that's true.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think it's interesting. It ties back to what we talked about earlier in terms of actually our priorities as men kind of walking through life, because it's back to being happy, isn't it? Like actually what you wanted there was to know that actually Sam had been happy,
Brad.
and then maybe kind of what he might have done to make himself happy. And yeah, so it brings us back to that topic, doesn't it? Because whatever those kids in school have got going on right now, it's trying to find the thing that is going to make them happy. And whether that's sport, like it was for you, Elliot, or whether it's books or drama or whatever it is, but they've got to find that thing, haven't they? And we want to inspire them to do that, because where there are gaps, we often find the wrong people inspiring those minds, I think.
Brad, arriving just now is a lamb tikka masala, some saag paneer, peshwari naan, some duck pancakes, some black bean sauce, the whole shebang. I think we need to get into what are our takeaways from this conversation. I haven't quite formulated mine yet. Do you feel like you want to kick off, Bradley? And Sam and Elliot, you're welcome to contribute as well, but or do you want me to kick off?
No, that's all right. You can throw me under the bus while you have a think, and I'll try and come up with something on the spot.
That is not what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I almost picking up what we've just talked about is what is the thing that's going to make you happy, and I think they're the sorts of conversations that people need to be having more. And I think, I see a lot in my role in schools is, I do lots of work with children who are dysregulated and are struggling to cope for whatever reasons. And I think we can often forget that actually that's a real struggle for those young people that's going on in their mind. And I think we need to get back to that idea of how do we make these people happy? How do we direct them towards happiness? How do we encourage them to discover their own happiness? Because as we've talked about throughout the show, there are so many negative influences. And even when you do something amazing like you guys have done, there's still some negative arsehole who wants to chime in and say like, you can't do this and you can't do that. Shut up. Go and if that person wasn't so unhappy, they wouldn't be chiming in, picking out negative things where other people are doing good stuff. So yeah, maybe it's that. Maybe it's this kind of search to be happy needs to be higher up the priority list. I'm gonna sit on that one. That's gonna be my takeaway, is we need to focus on what makes us happy and do more of that.
I like that very much, Brad. I have formulated my takeaway and I'm really proud of it. I always say that I'm proud of my takeaways. This one has come, if I scribble out that and scribble out that, this one comes with a diagram, which looks like, I don't want to cover it up, which looks like that for the viewers at home. Let me talk you through it.
Gym
Well, yeah. So a young man, and we're talking about as educators and people that are going to interact with young men and try to, if we possibly can, be positive influences and steer them in the right direction. And we know that for lots of young men, there's a big gym culture and to just get hench and get as big as you can. Not for every young man, but for some. And that's going to lead to going to the gym. And that going to the gym can then go in one of two directions. It can go in the direction of going to the gym, taking a gym selfie, posting that gym selfie, and then becoming anxious about how many likes or how much interaction that social media post gets, and how much that external validation validates you and fills you up from the inside. There's also a side topic there about how that gym selfie is going to make other boys and young men feel when they see that, and are they in competition with you? Or going to the gym could go in the other direction of go to the gym, release of endorphins, feel happy. So that same action of going to the gym can lead into two separate paths. And that actually, speaking, you mentioned that you and I, Brad, are possibly a generation above Sam and Elliot. And actually, when Elliot was talking about when he was, or when he would be, what did you say, Elliot? 30, 35, 40? And I was like, he still hasn't got to our age. He still hasn't quite got to me and Brad yet, but that's maybe eventually he will. From someone who was a young man and was going to the gym when social media wasn't even in a fantasy, it was wonderful. It was wonderful to just be able to go to the gym, get that endorphin high, and then to leave walking on a cloud with no concept of this could link into social approval from somewhere else, possibly the people that were in the gym at the time that I was in the gym. But that was it. That's where that circle closed. And actually, my advice to young men would be, if you can, turn your back on that stuff, because it's not going to make you happy. Whereas going to the gym, really positive thing, that endorphin rush, really positive thing, and then it's going to lead you happy. So, yeah, very much echoing Brad's thing of prioritize happiness by turning your back on the gym selfies and just embracing that experience for yourself.
I just wanted to add one thing to that, because it's pertinent to again a topic that not a topic, a point that Sam made earlier, but it's that internal versus external, and
Yes.
and we're ultimately we're both talking about seeking happiness here, but I think that people need to start seeking that internal happiness and not look for the external validation of that happiness. That's the important point, I think. So, work on stuff for you. Try to be better than you were yesterday, as opposed to trying to be better than the person that sat next to you or whatever. That's my only other thought.
Yes, Brad, but I'm trying to steal your point and Sam's point and pass it off as being mine. So
Yeah,
if you
I know.
could not recap my point and pass it off as yours. It worked,
Yeah.
didn't it, Elliot?
Yeah, it worked, yeah.
Okay,
Think you can show up here and draw a diagram and stuff. Get back in your PE teacher box. Anyway, somebody
it's a thing
else
of
with their
beauty.
own
Can
idea.
I do a takeaway from Elliot's assemblies?
Of
Yes,
course, yeah, we'd love to hear it.
So the mantra is sweep the shed, and what that is all about is doing positive things to look after yourself and the community around you, and sort of sweeping the shed. Certainly, when we're working with youngsters in school, is the real takeaway that I think certainly I did, and lots of other teachers and students did in our school from the assembly series that Elliot led.
That's a strong takeaway. And I'm going to look at see if there's a hashtag for sweep the shed, and I reckon any social media stuff, Brad, we could include that hashtag.
Yeah.
And did you say there was a video by the All Blacks that linked into
sweep? It's based on the book Legacy, which is I think it's called Legacy. I've forgotten who it's by now, but it's about what we can learn from the All Blacks.
Yeah.
And it's got the no dickheads thing in it as well.
Yeah.
Which is not a rule we can have on our podcast, because we've got Brad as an inherent part of the podcast.
Only a dickhead would say that.
Look at you being all edgy and swearing now.
We have talked about Nibbo. If you remember, again coming from the All Blacks, that idea of leaving the shirt in a better place.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I like that. I like the sweep the sheds.
James Kerr is who it's
Yeah,
by,
James Kerr.
and
Yeah.
we'll post a link to that in the show notes. So if people want to explore that avenue, by all means, use this podcast as a junction to explore that. That'd be great. Elliot, did you get a takeaway from the conversation?
I'm kind of an amalgamation of all of yours. I like what you were saying, Brad, is that about doing what you really enjoy and finding a way to keep doing it. And it was making me think, it's like sometimes as a teacher, you get in your mind these standards that you hold the students to, but you forget that they're not you. And sometimes it's easy to forget how enjoyable it was to do some of the little silly things. And and I think when you get older, you stop to do those. So trying to, I guess, holding on to what's golden. And whilst you grow up, you still have a good line, like Sam said, the legacy, and you're respectful and you do everything right. But you still have to find those time to be that cheeky chap, to enjoy yourself and hold on to the things that are dear to you. And that is certainly easier without social media. But if it's sport, if it's fishing, if it's whatever, it's just important that if you want to continue with that happiness, you need to find the perfect opportunity, and you need to do that with finding the things you really enjoy and keeping on with it.
Yeah, strong advice, isn't it? And it's the funny thing is, it's not rocket science.
No,
it just needs being presented in as many different formats and as many different ways as there are young people that need that advice. Because from those of us that have been through that period of our lives, we do have that benefit of experience, and it has enabled us to say, give great advice like you've just given there, Elliot. So yeah, really valuable.
Awesome stuff. I just want to say thanks, guys. I'm sure Nibbo's gonna wrap up in a minute, but it's been great to have you come on and just share your views and have a bit of a laugh and hear about what you've been up to. I think it's such a powerful message that you've been sharing, and you certainly are just, I imagine lots of the kids at your school kind of look up to you guys as role models, as they do with lots of teachers. But I think it's incredibly kind of brave to take on the challenges and to put yourself out there and take the risk. And I just think it really deserves that credit where credit's due, really. So
thank you.
So yeah, we will formally write to the head teacher and say early summer break for you guys.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thanks very much for having us on, guys.
It's been great.
It's an absolute pleasure. And just as Brad was saying about the powerful message, there's also that side message that is what our podcast is really all about, that it's actually not true that men cannot and will not talk about mental health. Because when we're talking about our thoughts, feelings, emotions, experiences, we talked about the anxiety of putting up a social media post and that social acceptance. That is all mental health. All of that is mental health. And we've been sat here for 68 minutes now talking about mental health. Men can and will and do talk about mental health. And it's just about taking these conversations and then rolling with them further and further and further in the lives of men and boys, which obviously you guys are working towards in your school, which is fantastic. I really think it's very laudable indeed. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll follow your adventures from here.
Thank you. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it. I genuinely will come on again next year.
Well, you see, like I didn't want to ask that question, but that's the kind of the last part of it. Brad, correct me if I'm wrong. Every guest has said they've actually enjoyed having the conversation and enjoyed being part of the conversation. So not only is it something that men will tolerate and will accept, you can enjoy these conversations. And then, like, if we were a group of 4 mates, then there's more opportunity to sort of go slightly deeper into each other's personal experiences and our past and things. And excuse me, Elliot, you could tell us what it was like when you were 8, and Brad, you could tell us what it was like when you were 8, and start to backfill it a little bit and pad it out a little bit more. But we've started that ball rolling, and we've shown people that it's not a difficult ball to roll. We can have these conversations. They're fun.
Yeah, it's quite empowering. I do find being able to talk about it and be listened to is quite empowering. And I think
do you know, I'm so much more. I'm so much better at talking about it myself now because I have these conversations all the time with people.
Yes.
And now it doesn't faze me at all. And that's what we were just trying to open up to people, because I think the more you hear it, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's normal. It's normal to talk about that stuff. It's, you're not losing any man points if you talk about it. Actually, you can have a bit of a laugh with it.
So that was Elliot and Sam. We really enjoyed the conversation that we had with them, as I hope you can tell in the recording. There was so much that, as you will have noticed, we only did one would you rather question, which means there were two would you rather questions going spare. Now, because I don't think anyone out there is going to buy those would you rather questions off us, Brad, we might as well reveal what they were so that people can have a little bit of a think about what their answers would be. So we didn't have time to get round to would you rather be a masculine woman or a feminine man? And the intention of that question was going to be diving into, does society reward gender or masculinity? Because I think I would choose to be a masculine woman rather than a feminine man. But that's for our listeners to try to work out what their answer would be. And then one really interesting point that we didn't get round to getting to, because it's probably a whole podcast all on its own, is the idea that there is a patriarchy, and that is, for any of our listeners that aren't aware, that is where men are seen to occupy all the positions of authority in society. But what we've realised in our research for this very show is that for young men and boys, the patriarchy is not as real as it is for adults. Because for young men and boys, if they have a single parent at home, that single parent is likely to be their mother. If they have split custody between their mother and their father, it's likely to be the mother that has the greater majority of that custody. In primary school, certainly my son's primary school, the head teacher's a man, there's one TA that's a man. Every other member of staff, i.e. authority figure, is a woman. And then in secondary schools, the split is about 60-40 in favour of women. So actually, young men are experiencing far more female authority figures than they are male authority figures, which is what makes them susceptible to that whole toxic masculinity culture of the likes of Andrew Tate coming in and saying women need to be objectified and seen as the enemy almost. But I just think people don't really remember that young men that have come up from living at home and primary school and secondary school, the vast majority of their authority figures have been women, and that's something that I think is important in this conversation. So we don't have time to get around to any of that, but if our listeners stay tuned to Mental Health Takeaways, at some point in the future, we'll get round to answering those questions and hopefully shining a light on that issue.
Before I say bye, I just encourage anybody that, as well as kind of sharing the episode with friends, family, people people that you might think it's relevant to, even if you don't think it's that relevant, there will be an episode on there now that might be relevant to somebody. So please share it. However, if you've got an opinion about those would you rathers that Matt's just talked about, then you could drop that into the comments for us and perhaps start a little bit of a dialogue there too. So get involved in the show, whether it's sharing, whether it's commenting. We'd love to hear from you.
Good shit.
Do you want to say bye?
That's been done.
I think I fucking nailed that.